India can be Vishwaguru in telling the world what can be a dharmic management, Yeah. Society taking ownership for their behavior and ownership for the resources. Okay. If this happens, corporates will be more conscious, government will be more conscious in making policy. That is why society has to now be conscious of that and drive down their value. And rather than valuing them for exploiting resources, you have to also put a not premium but penalty on that. Okay. Then obviously, companies will also start responding.
Namaste and welcome to another episode of IKS Changemakers, an Indica podcast. This is your host Shivakumar, serving and nurturing IKS Changemakers at Indica. In this podcast, we bring you people, their thought and their work, which is essentially Dharma in action through Indian knowledge systems. Today, our IKS Changemaker is Professor G. Ramesh, Director, Niti School of Public Policy and retired Professor IIM Bangalore. Today, we shall explore the subject Dharmic Management, one of his many passionate research concerns. Hope you enjoy this exploration of Dharma and management. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing, Professor Ramesh.
Thank you.
Professor, we all have an intuitive appreciation of what Dharma is. And to be slightly formal, among the many definitions of Dharma from the texts, Dharayati iti Dharma is one that is very relevant for management. That is, that which upholds and sustains is Dharma. What does it uphold? It upholds everything, sustains everything. That which sustains everything is Dharma. It has two dimensions. One is to make Artha Kama, that is the desires and the needs of all for all times sustainable. So that is on the material world. Two, to protect all paths of sacred pursuits. These are the two dimensions of Dharma. Of course, from the management standpoint, I would say the former is what we need some focus. Some would say both are needed in management, but we can come to that. How do you articulate what Dharma is from within the parlance and the framework of management?
Thank you, Shiva. I think it's a good introduction. And like you said, people have an intuitive understanding of what is Dharma. Okay. And another possibility is that whether it is at the governance level, the board level, or management level, or people level, probably it's at the back of the mind that something we are doing could be right, could be wrong from dharmic angle like that in their own interpretation. Okay. But it's definitely not part of any formal system that one can think of in an organizational management. Okay. But it gets manifested in a couple of forms, like you said. One is sustainability. Okay. Now, increasingly, people are being asked questions about that. Okay, because what we call as external diseconomies, whatever an organization does, it creates external economies as well as external diseconomy. Diseconomy can be in terms of the pollution cost, or even, let's say, congestions, okay, or depletion of resources, non-renewable resources, or like that. Okay, so increasingly questions are being asked. Profit at what cost? Okay. So that is something we can discuss as we go about how the organizations are handling that and what does it mean from dharmic angle. Okay. For example, triple bottom line, sometime down the line I can explain. That's one of the way people think they are coping with the environmental concerns and sustainability. Within the organization, there is a dharma involved. Okay, that is in terms of the equitable distribution, equity, access, fairness to the people and all that. Okay. In fact, there we call it stakeholders. Okay. And everybody is a stakeholder. Vendor is a stakeholder, and probably last employee is a stakeholder, society is a stakeholder, like that. That's why increasingly you find protest when, let's say, a plant is set up or when some development project is being thought about, or like that. So one thing I can say that organization as well as society is getting increasingly sensitive about certain things, but it's still not the way you would like it to be from dharmic angle. It's really fully not dharmic. But I mean, maybe in a modern language, they may define it in some other way, triple bottom line, sustainability and all that. But I think that consciousness has to come. This is where I feel India can be a Vishwa Guru in telling the world what can be a dharmic management, Yeah.
So, from your description, the sense that I get is there are certain attributes from within the framework of management that the system is trying to evolve towards dharma, but there is no holistic thought and composition on that, on systemic approach to it yet. So clearly that's a space that is waiting to be grabbed up. It's interesting. So that then brings us, see, there are two dimensions to it. One is to have attributes and instruments that pursue dharma. And that is, if sustainability is what we want to pursue. Second thing is to be conscious of what all things are actually harming dharma that are within the current pursuit of management. So what do you think from within the current framework of management that's hurting dharma? We can talk about philosophy, principles level, as well as to specific levels as to what is the conflict between strategy and marketing from dharma standpoint. What are the instruments that modern management systems use? Are they dharmic, and so on and so forth?
So if you look at it, I mean, the basis of all pursuits, if you see, really marketing, finance, management is economics. Okay. Now, if you look at it from economics angle, okay, and if you look at it from dharmic angle like that, okay, people talk about profit making. Okay, now somewhere in the Indian psyche, okay, you should answer that. Okay, it has gone into that profit making is a sin, but you would say the earth doesn't say that. I would like your explanation on that. Okay, maybe in economic sense we make a distinction, subtle distinction between making profit and making extra normal profit. Profiteering is another step. Gambling is another extension. Okay. What this could mean is that, for example, we say in a purely economic interpretation, probably in a monopolistic profit, oligopolistic profit, which is where the world is tending towards. Okay. Now you call it adharma, I don't know. It's not really adharma because there is a market correction for that also. But what is being talked about, the way the solutions are being talked about in the current world is that one is the self-regulation. Suppose there is some problem with the environmental pollution. How do you correct it? Then state intervenes. Okay. State intervention is not same as correcting a dharma. I mean, you mean that it should be intrinsic to the organization, intrinsic to the management style. That's what you mean when you say dharmic style. Okay. That may not be still there. They're only worried about the cost of doing something and not being wrong about doing something. Okay, I mean, if I'm taking extreme position, okay, maybe organizations are not that bad, but this is where it is. One is the extreme position they are taking. Another angle I'll tell you, there's always about, today we talk about, let's say, the affirmative action, for example. That is also one way of correcting a inequity in the system, isn't it, or society. So that is also happening, but there is certain positive, I can see IIMs and IITs going towards that, trying to make a societal correction within themselves. Okay. And that is also, I don't know, you don't know how much is internally driven, intrinsically driven, vis-a-vis externally driven, extrinsically driven. I would prefer that these are all intrinsic. That's the way you would call it as a dharmic style of management. So there are these manifestations of unequal access to resources, unequal exploitation of resources, and then instruments such as, let's say, economic cost, and then carbon cost, like that sort of things are there. Okay, or even control on profits. I mean, you tend to then SEBI may step in if there's if there's not proper reporting, accounting, and things like that. Stock exchanges globally. Internally, it's about let's say affirmative actions or trying to create equal opportunity for all, gender and society, inequality and like that. So these are some of the manifestations I can talk to you. But again, you should tell really what is profit in the earth concept.
So that's very interesting. Many of the parameters that you just narrated are all approximate indicators of whether of the probability of serving dharma. Yeah. Representation may result in dharma or may not result in dharma. We cannot say that categorically. Yeah. But we assume that a certain representation has a higher chance of resulting in dharma. So that is one way of approaching dharma. I'm not sure whether that is, yielding any substantial result yet. But coming back to your other point on artha, and profiteering and then the sin, or the otherwise of it. Traditionally in Indian history, it's very clear that pursuing profit has never been problematized. But the important thing is the pursuit of profit is not glorified either. So there is it is considered as a necessity for a certain profession, and that's about it. For instance, the entire Vaishya class would have pursued profit, but a weaver community will live in completely oblivious to the pursuit of profit of somebody else. They are not glorifying it. They are glorifying something else. So the dharma pursuit was balanced across different pursuits by different communities. In the modern situation, everybody has to deal with profit. So that is a complication that has arrived at that. So sustainability was achieved as a consequence of some pursuing something, some others pursuing the exact opposite of it, and both being valuable in the society. Today the opposites are not valuable in the society, and that is the challenge that we have. Whereas business institutions have to pursue profit, rest of the society is also getting galvanized into valorizing profit making, or either the state is putting down and the rest of the society is also being galvanized to putting it down. So the universalization of everything is how dharma is getting negatively affected, is my understanding.
But I think in India we are neither here nor there. We are either valorizing profit and industrialists, or we are villainizing the profit.
So it is. That's what I said. Either institutions want everybody to valorize.
So as a society, probably you are falling between two stools. And I'll tell you one more thing. Okay, the profit making is not an option. Okay, it's a compulsion when you are running, because you have to get return to the investors and guys who are lent to you. In fact, I tell even my students in IIM. Okay. When you are in this corporate, when you say I'm a Fortune 500 company, which is what all these guys are pursuing like that, you are in a Formula 1 race. In a Formula 1 race, you cannot say I'll go at my speed. You have to follow the Formula 1 norms, and then you are in a race. When you get into a race, only all these things happen, and you cannot stay back in the race also. Okay, that is where we need to see how do you bring in, let's say, the Dharmic principles there, in spite of all that. So there is what we call as, quarter se quarter tak, I call it QSQT. Okay, that's profit quarter on quarter. Okay, that's driven by the investors and valuation like that. In all these races, if one has to really drive, one step I have seen is the one hurdle I can see, or one, like the, control you put on the horse. Okay, and is triple bottom, where you have to look at the people also, and you have to look at the planet also, we say, not just the profit.
Correct.
Okay. So that some way there's happening, but that self-correcting mechanism is still not as strong as the drive that is driving profit and then profit motivation.
From your articulation, the sense that I get is that the material indices that need to be pursued, like profit, for a company, so many other associated matrices, or GDP for the nation, are quite clearly established, whereas other dharma indices, like what is the impact of doing something on the society,
Even
are not
happiness
enough,
index, even
or the
happiness index.
individual's happiness index, or if a pursuit of this metric, what does it mean for the society, that dimension is not sufficiently evolved. So the connection of an institution with other entities in the society is where dharma is getting compromised, is how I think. What do you think about
Yeah,
it?
possibly because corporates and government are also part of the society, and it depends upon how the society has been manifesting and evolving like that. One. Second thing is probably in those days we lived in isolation. Isolation could mean the entire Bharat. I'm not saying just Chera, Chola, Pandya, Vijayanagara like that. Maybe entire Bharat was also in isolation. Let's say, not so much in interaction with the rest of the world. There was interaction.
Or minimal
There was
interaction.
minimal exactly. But now it's not like that. I mean, it's really borderless. If you really ask me, thought processes are borderless. Economics is borderless today. Okay. In this context, to really remain saying that I will be like this is bit a challenge. Okay. For example, I always say that. Okay. I tell this. I will give you a choice. Let's say I will give you 12% growth rate of GDP. Okay, but with communism or without freedom, okay, of expressions and general freedom, individual freedom, or 8% with all the freedom that we are enjoying as a democracy country. Okay, what would people prefer? We seem to prefer democracy with 8%, even if it is the lower cost, isn't it? If it is, lower development at higher cost. So that's a choice. Maybe you can call it dharmic also. That's also probably dharmic, isn't it? I don't know if that would fit your framework of dharmic principles. A conscious choice.
Yes. So, I'll go back to the first principles. As long as something is not hurting the resources, physical resources, and their availability for today and for the future, then it is dharma. As long as we are not hurting the pursuit of the society for itself, then also it is dharma. But modern institutions are always in conflict with what the society seeks to pursue for itself because of the enormous economic power that it has. So the equilibrium between the institution and the state and the society is not there yet, and that is where lines of dharma get crossed. More so, the fact that you can't have a universal theory of it is what makes it very difficult, because finally societies have cultures, societies belong to a civilization, but the principles of the civilization are also not considered as part of the management framework. So if you have a company that cuts across multiple countries, its management framework will still be some one thing, and it may or may not be sufficiently aligned with the cultural realities of each country. Every company strives to do something about it, but that's still at the borders. It's not at the core of the institution itself. But my question to you then is that if that is the challenge, between the state, the institution, and the society, and if societies have cultures and past, then is it possible to have a singular theory of management that cuts across the globe? If no, then what is the course correction required?
So we call it business, government, and society. In fact, we have even a course called BGS. Okay, in IIMs, I mean, something around that, business and government society, and what is the relationship among the three. But as you said, society is overbearing things, isn't it? I mean, for example, government cannot still regulate certain things of the society. Okay, for example, marriages. Okay, marriages and temple also. Okay, that's why there's so much resistance to government, controlling the temples and like that. Okay. Similarly, I mean, it is because of Indian society that Indian corporates still remain within certain realms and don't go overboard like the way Chinese corporate would do, or example, let's say North American corporates may do. Okay, and there are certain things. For example, we may still don't like, let's say, education to be privatized. We think that education is a right. Okay, and it's a duty of the society, duty of the government to provide education, whether it is primary or medical. Even medical, we think that is the duty of the society and government. I mean, government and business in the sense, you should not be charged for that. Let's say that's a principle in which, in fact, even UK and Canada operates. Okay, so there are certain these underlying principles or unwritten principles of the society, which is really governs the government as well as the, I would say, business also. And to that extent, like you say, Marwadi communities or business community or Chettiar communities, they are all very strongly governed by that. And I'm sure those, I mean, at the first level, societal values, at the next level, family values will be still governing those ways the government, the business are managed. I'll give one, classic example. Before independence or till this muck of industrial regulation all came, Tatas and Birlas were managed like that. Okay, Tatas and Birlas invested in society. Okay, there was no CSR then. Nobody talked about CSR. It was very, very genuine CSR that was happening, which was Dharmic, I would say. They built institution. You would have heard of it's still called Tata Institute. IAC, if you ask the cab guy, he knows it as Tata Institute. Okay, and then they built temples. Okay, and they sort of supported nationalist movement also those days because they cannot be very distant from that. In fact, there are people, Tata wanted to start steel plant because he wanted a domestic steel plant. There was Vavasi who wanted to start a shipping company to promote Indian trading. Okay, so business was connected with society. Government was connected with the society, okay, before independence. Somewhere after independence only, maybe after the industrial policies started coming and these government policies started coming, that connections got disrupted. Okay, otherwise there's a close connection between society and business. Maybe, discussing with you, I'm getting a thought now that we should strengthen that relationship between the society and the business.
I agree.
And society and government, and society should have some ownership for the business and government. Okay.
True. So, sir, one thing from our previous conversation I gather is that for an institution to pursue dharma, an easier path is to be well connected with the larger society. And the society means both the immediate and the, in multiple concentric circles, so that they can take appropriate decisions and they know whether a particular pursuit of profit is harmful or not. That's obviously one, execution aligned way of course correcting yourselves. So clearly that may have been the advantage of our past business pursuits. And now that institutions are living in isolation and expectation that they be connected with the society is not very high, due to which profit pursuits could be harmful. Can we say this, that cultural connectedness will enhance the ability of an institution to pursue dharma?
We can say that in the sense that it's something like society, you can say, the conscious keeper of the world or the people and like that. In one sense, they represent the conscience of the society in whichever way it expresses itself. Okay, it could be in terms of societal equity, okay, societal representation, societal fairness, and all that. And that we should expect that the organizations will reflect that. Okay, the organization of the US will reflect probably their liberty and freedom that they always speak about. Ours is more of societal welfare, okay, public welfare and all we talk about in India. So it should reflect, and as I said, somewhere this got disconnected with when you created entities, okay, and then you say that it's a sort of an identity by itself, okay, and it lives for itself. Like we say that, of course, temples are an entity, and God is let's say the central figure of the entity, the temples. Like that, we started thinking like, these are also entity like any you and me, let's say, okay, or any organization that we may set it up like that, and it has its own rights, as if, okay, it has its own rights means it's
independent of the society.
Its investors has its own right, okay, and their interest is exploitation of profit, investment and resources and like that. So that is one way to look at that, okay. And maybe corporates are doing best in that. I mean, like you said, you cannot tie the hands of the corporates and say you should be like this if it is competing globally, okay. But in the interest of the society that it represents, I think, yes, it should be connected. For example, an institution should be connected to the society. I'll give a classic example. Agricultural university, if it is there, it should be connected to the society. Okay, if there's a fertilizer unit, it should be connected to the society, how it really contributes to the society instead of exploiting the society. What is opposite of that? Not representing and exploiting that. I mean, maybe at the cost of the society and like that. Here, one point I want to make is that society also should take ownership for the resources. Okay, even a park, it can be a park, it can be a highway, okay, it can be anything public, or it can be even what a corporate does in your neighborhood. Only once, for example, when a bottling company tried to tap water in a village in Kerala, the villagers protested and they saw to it that the plant doesn't come up there. Okay, that's what I mean when I say society taking ownership for their behavior and ownership for the resources. Okay, if this happens, corporates will be more conscious, government will be more conscious in making policies. I mean, yeah.
I agree. So that's an important thing. The critical point here is to have the right equilibrium. Right. If one of the entities is overbearing, it either results in unhealthy capitalism or extreme socialism or communism. So having the right balance in this connection is very important, and that's where the modern state may not be, sufficiently invested in building the right balance. One of the entities is, running amok, and we don't know how to, bring back the balance in this triangle. I think it's very clear that well-connectedness or the right connectedness, not even well-connectedness, is one way of pursuing Dharma. But I'm still very interested.
Let me complete this point. Yeah. When you say that, what happens is that if there's imbalance, let's say corporates run amok, but I'll also tell you society runs amok, let's say. For example, we say that populism. Okay, populism is also society gone overboard, I would say. True. I mean, if the government is trying to address, one of the examples I can give is freebies. We were never freebie country. Okay, in a dharmic thing, we were all self-reliant, and we believe in our own self-esteem, and we didn't want to depend on government. Okay, and we were self-dependent. That culture, we have made it like a dependent citizenship. Okay, which is also society gone overboard, I would say. Okay, and that is again to be corrected. I mean, and that can be corrected. Like in Bhagavad Gita, you say. I wouldn't go that far, but I would definitely say that some leadership only can do that. Okay, when one of the arms go wrong, then somebody has to really play that leadership role in bringing that correcting mechanism. When market goes wrong, which is business goes wrong, or when the democracy goes wrong, okay, which is literally people going wrong, society going wrong. Okay, that correction can happen only through a strong leadership.
So the way I see it is, society has lost its previous stake and stability. The state is far more firmly established and entrenched, and business institutions are far more isolated, have and can pursue indices of sharper focus but greater stability. So this is how I would like to articulate the crisis of dharma, in this
Because
triangle.
industry interests are always focused, people's interests are diffused. Okay, so obviously they have more lobbying power, correcting power, or influencing power than the people.
And when
So
the
that's where
instruments are
you call,
sharper,
that's where maybe this is also a principle of adharma, is the cronyism. Crony capitalism is, I mean, what I can say, manifestation of adharma, you can say, in management.
while we have discussed sufficiently about the right connectedness of the state, the business institutions, and society, I'm still very eager to know whether it is possible to design a set of indices where the business institutions themselves can pursue dharma without external intervention. Societal intervention is soft, states intervention is hard, or the governance institutions are interventions are hard. But how about intrinsically being dharmic? Do you see the possibility of indices
Yeah,
emerging?
so one attempt is that this is thanks to lobby outside, may not be intrinsic, but lobby outside. But what's happening is the triple bottom line, where they're also investing on people, they're also investing on planet, and they are also look at the future generations. Okay, so that's happening, not at the level you would want and I would want from dharmic angle, but definitely that be the future because they realize this is no longer sustainable. Okay, you are looking at zero water day. Can you imagine cities having zero water day? That's a manifestation. That's a consequence of our behavior. Okay, so that way that's happening. Another way that corporates are really being pushed to is to really the external regulations also can happen. Okay, where I'll give one good news. Studies have shown, finance studies have shown that companies which report, which have got better standards of reporting, okay, they are received well in the capital market and people are willing to take a lesser return from them. Okay, if you're a high risk company, obviously you have to give higher return. If you're a low risk conservative company, people will be okay with a lower return than the compared to the market, let's say. So what's similarly probably environment. Suppose let's say the people investors think that you are exposed to certain indemnity because your actions on the environment they could undervalue you. Okay, this is again there are studies showing that. So there are those market mechanisms, market corrections happening. Okay, those are happening where markets are stronger like US and Europe and like that, not so much in India. Okay, so that also has to come to India. That is why society has to now be conscious of that and drive down their value, and rather than valuing them for exploiting resources, you have to also put a not premium but penalty on that. Okay, then obviously companies will also start responding. Right now that's weak in India in spite of the fact that we were leading on the dharmic principles as far as the society management is concerned. Where we lost it, you can blame it on anybody, external forces, but we did it.
Yeah, clearly one thing is very clear is that post-industrial revolution, business entities have a far much different configuration than in the past, and we have not realigned other things in order to take care of that reality. That's an opportunity space for us to step in, and definitely that consciousness is there, but I think we have not made a good start yet on that. But coming back to the indices, I think you spoke about several indices which are kind of emerging, where over and beyond profit or revenue, you can think of a company as valuable, and then you continue your investment in such companies. But my question is, can that be elevated to a sustainability index itself, which is more than what today is being pursued? Today, some environmental parameters, carbon footprint plus are being invested upon. But overall, whether a business itself is sustainable or not is a weaker conversation today. In Indian philosophy's parlance, we say there is a cycle of Srishti Sthiti Laya, creation, sustenance, and dissolution in everything. And anything that we do is, happens within this. Is it possible for us to think of, on a particular initiative or a business or a product, where is a company in which phase? Where is it, in the creation phase, or in the sustenance phase, or in the dissolution phase, or is it overdoing something that may result in pralaya? Right. Is there a possibility to factor in this and evolve new indices? This is a question.
I can give few cases of pralaya in the sense. One was Satyam, of course. Okay, it was pralaya. From 180 rupees, it came to 8 rupees or something like that. Recent one, current one, is actually one edutech company. Okay, where the multi-billion dollars, it really came hurtling down. Okay, which is from lack of sustainable, I would say lack of focus on sustenance. Okay, and then lack of pursuit of not even profit but valuation. Not even profit. Even profit, if that pursued, probably the situation would have been different. Okay. Another example, which was more like a slow poisoning, which happened from all these Dharmic pursuits, Shruti, overemphasis on Shruti, which probably can be growth, which probably can be expansion, okay, is the bank's NPA, okay. And so it drove the GDP. We were all very happy in the, and then banks were also growing at a breathtaking speed and like that. But when we started recognizing the, defaulters, instead of actually, this again environment, we were actually greening it, which was bad for the bank. Okay, now it's going red. From there, okay, once the NPA started getting recognized and started being treated. Okay, all these things because somewhere the business lost that Dharmic principle. You can see Dharmic is probably, some of the people may switch us off, saying no, it's too far-fetched. Why call it Dharmic and like that?
That is my question.
But let's say sustenance. What's the?
We know that some people erred, some people were greedy, and so on and so forth. But can we design sustainability indices that makes it so apparent and visible that such a pursuit is not possible?
Correct. So two things are important. Okay, one is, like Greenspan said in his Senate hearing, that post meltdown, he said that I thought the banks will self-correct themselves, but they were greedy. They were greedy for 20 years. Okay, you can be greedy for a quarter, 2 quarters. They are greedy for 20 years. He said, okay, it sold for 20 years. Okay, he was not defending that, but he was just explaining him. Okay. So probably greed has again taken over. Okay, as far as the indices go, okay, indices are more transparent balance sheet that one is really going forward. Second is bringing the cost of pollution within the calculation of profits.
Exactly, that is how you.
Which becomes a boardroom discussion, yes, not in the civil society or street discussion like that.
It's like the control system in electrical engineering.
Correct. So it has to be part of the nerve center. It has to be discussed, like what we call as boardroom discussion and drawing room discussion. Okay, it has to happen both places. Okay, and then even if it happens the board, but market has to value that. Okay, which is you and me.
True.
Okay, it's not the employees or top management. It's you and me who are investing in these stocks. If we also start valuing these principles, obviously companies will start reacting. Whereas we are actually now fueling these companies. Okay, government is fueling them, governance is fueling them, that is board, and investors are fueling them. So what is there to now really control? They have to be really, hurt themselves to really pursue Dharma. It's like that.
Somewhere my view is that and you should correct me, from your experiences, that the theory of management does not factor all these things, fundamentally in its core. It's trying to manage this at the periphery. If that is true, then how do we bring it to the core?
So we have started doing certain cosmetic things. It's true that what we preach may not really, drive them towards the dharmic ways of management, because we put them on a race. Okay, and then we cannot. In fact, there is a theory which says that when you appoint a CEO, how much freedom to give? Should he tie his hand? Okay, you cannot ask a player to go full steam and then but tying his hand. Okay, so that also there is a theory to that. Okay, so there are these controls being applied and then it's still being debated. But one way, again, the cosmetic way that I was talking about, for example, then we say that we started offering courses on ethics, ethical management, like that. What is happening is now is that a very bright student can get A in ethics. Okay, now does it mean that he's more ethical than the guy who gets B? I don't know, because all these things during my school days at least, but I don't know at your generation how it was. There was something called schools of moral session. Something used to be
Moral
there
science.
where moral stories used to be taught and things like that. Okay. And in fact, one of the people who used to really teach moral science is really the language teachers who used to teach us. Okay. So I think that's the stage you have to really bring those culture, which is again society, which is the parent and the neighborhood that he lives in, like that. But when they come to the MBA, IIMs and IITs, I don't know, they are probably already molded. And probably what we are doing is also counterproductive. I think we have to do, these institutes need course correction. In fact, they have come through the race to these institutes. Now we tell them, no, don't go do the race.
So what you're saying is the course correction has to happen at multiple levels.
Multiple levels.
And we have not started significantly yet.
Right now we are talking about it, but valuing the wrong things. Okay, the value.
I think it's still emerging. I think we are trying to grapple with the problem, I guess.
Emerging in the sense that people are seeing the mistake of the pursuit, that this is wrong. Okay, that moral guilt we have put in corporates as well as society, but what we are valuing is still the opposite.
True.
Okay, so that they have to correct themselves.
Yeah, there is a inherent contradiction.
Even in simple compensating a CEO or a top manager, there are now discussions and papers on what we should really reward him for. Okay, because he drives the organization.
True, very true. One opportunity that is a space that is there in front of us clearly is that there are certain crises that are already perceived. For instance, there is a climate change, reality that everybody is staring. There is also, very deep insecurity in the society about the future, in spite of the fact that there is so much material development. There is individual fatigue or the employee fatigue. So, do you see that these are opportunity spaces where we can step in, theorize, and get started?
True. So, what is now striking about the crisis you are saying is that we all thought, okay, it will not happen in my generation, it will happen in the next generation.
True.
But for example, the zero water is happening at our time, not even our generation.
It is not expected.
It's happening at our time, which is really shaking up people. Okay, we thought, somewhere in Cape Town is happening. Then there are talks of Bangalore having zero water days. Okay, which is shaking the people. Okay, now in organization we say, in society also, crisis is the best opportunity to change, isn't it? Now COVID, I thought, will change people, but post-COVID people bounce back very fast. All the behavior splitting are all back. Nobody changed. Okay, but this crisis, I think, is too precious to lose, and then I think we should try to attempt to do something. And I think that has happened at the societal level, government level, business level. All of them had to put together. In fact, one suggestion I will leave with you probably, that since it's election time, the people should ask in the manifesto, Okay, what are they going to do about these aspects? Okay, instead of asking for more and more, they'd ask for how they are going plan to do the damage control, especially of the cities. Okay, and cities are really affected, and you are going providing for more and more cities and bigger cities. But how do you propose to handle this crisis? Okay, and that has to again happen at when we say multiple levels, only three level. One is the government level, society level, and business level. Okay, from who drives it? Mostly it will be a government or society. Business, unfortunately, is not taking the leadership. It can because it has the leadership like Nanda Nilekani, he took, for example, Aadhaar. Okay, like that, somebody has to take the public leadership to drive some of this initiative, which, for example, those days, people like Nani Palkiwala used to do. Okay, they used to raise voice. And who is that voice? Who can raise the voice is really the question.
And hopefully, some public policy institutions can also anchor
they should
this.
drive that. They should drive that. I mean, you know.
That brings me to the last question. I know there is a lot more to discuss, and we must have several discussions on this subject. Like you said, you know, if somebody takes leadership and the initiative today and seeks to reconfigure one's own institution on the principles of Dharma, is it really possible? Because if the rest of the ecosystem is operating on totally on a different set of principles and pursuits, is it possible?
I mean, it is difficult because there are other forces driving you. I mean, what we call as centripetal and centrifugal forces, and you have to balance among the four. Between these two. In fact, Infosys, when they started, they were like that. They followed certain principles, and then they could make it. Isn't it? It's not like they became martyr, but they really became successful. Software companies are by and large like that. They stayed away from many things, and they could pursue the fair practices and like that. There is a drive among even pharma companies to become more and more fair in their practices. So that's also you can see. Even Transparency International and those initiatives are all happening. Okay. But these are all very incremental, and very individualistic and things like that. But how do we institutionalize it, and how do we make it the standards of the society and the way the business run is still a long way. Right now are there forces is very difficult. Okay, but I would say that it's not ruled out because there's a global movement towards all this. Okay. And and another one aspect that's really happening is people are contributing to society in big way, including Aziz Premji and then many other the industrialists. I mean, it started the Rockefeller long back, and even our own Birlas and Tatas, Bajaj and all, they have been always contributing. Okay, that's another way they have been really correcting that the imbalances with the society. But it has to be internal, it has to be intrinsic and self-driven, isn't it? And it has to be valued.
It has to be valued
by the market and the society. Okay.
How do we make the pursuit itself is valuable?
Valuable
is
correct.
The question.
Earlier it can be just an appeal. Okay, but not that is also it's intrinsic, but it's instrumental. Okay.
True. Thank you, Professor Ramesh. I think the way this conversation has evolved, one can see that the subject is complex and it is still emerging, and we have to be honest that everything is not clear yet. We are where we are, but one positive thing is that consciousness is emerging, that there is something wrong that needs to be reconfigured without blaming anybody. Otherwise, the blame game always will result in some kind of a wrong revolution. I think it's a collective responsibility. Somewhere I feel that the management institutions and public policy institutions, so it is through institutions that we will get this dharma balance back, because the thought has to be evolved. It's not merely practices at the periphery. Thought, rigor, theory, instruments, all of that will have to be done in knowledge centers. I'm sure that will happen, There are several dimensions that I could not cover today. For instance, how can an institution be dharmic without having a sense of the sacred, which is another topic in itself that we should do at some point in time, but for another day. And thank you to Professor Ramesh and to all our viewers for being with us. Thank you all for being with us in this episode of IKS Changemakers, an Indica podcast. In this episode, we spoke to IKS Changemaker Professor Ramesh G on Dharmic Management. In each episode, we shall bring to you a new IKS Changemaker whose thought and work are essentially Dharma in action through the concepts and ideas in Indian knowledge systems. धन्यवाद.